first family, managed by Jimmy Hart, and of course we mentioned him earlier with the Hart Foundation. So with this group here, as you heard Jeremy talking about all the many names that were involved in the Heenan family, there's probably even more fucking names and too many. I'm not even going to name, Jeremy. We had talked about this a little bit off the air. I'm going to tell you this. Jimmy Hart was the mainstay. He was the main manager, whatever. But all the fucking names that were in the first family might well have been second, third, and fourth fucking family, you know. So, but we got to put them in there. So coming in at number 5, I had the first family. What do you think?
I think that's a great choice. You're right. There were so many people through the first family that it did encompass all the in-laws and outlaws. You know, Eddie Gilbert was in there at one point. The Poffo brothers, you know, Macho Man Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo were in there. Jim Neidhart, the Iron Sheik, Rick Rude, who I think is a sorely appreciated in wrestling. Ox Baker, who I never understood why he was a big deal, but that heart punch looks scary as shit.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get into his time in the WWF, Greg Valentine, Brutus Beefcake, Adrian Adonis, Terry Funk, Haas Funk, the Hart Foundation, the Honky Tonk Man, Dino Bravo. I mean, just A-list after A-list after A-list celebrity. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So that was number 5, the first family, and again, we're probably still missing a couple of people off the Heenan family and off the first family.
I read less names. Yeah, I read off less names than I. Let me see. I read less than I left off.
Is that right? Yes. Okay. So a shitload of them.
Well, there's a whole lot to say about Jimmy Hart. Of course, he had a full career as a heel manager before I even had ever heard of him. You know, because I didn't know about Memphis till well after I'd started watching wrestling. You know, but he's one of those guys. I mean, he's up there with Lou Albano for, like, you know, people that held titles while he was managing them.
Yeah.
Every major name went through his hands. I believe that Greg the Hammer Valentine was the IC champion when he was managed by Jimmy Hart. It's just, you really have to spend like a whole hour just looking at who he managed when they were important.
Yeah. Well, I won't spend an hour, but I could. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Hart is a really good guy. I saw Jimmy Hart this past October. Nothing but love for Jimmy Hart. Let me tell you, he's one of the classiest people, one of the most uplifting. It's all good. It's okay, baby. It'll be fine. And I got to see Jimmy Hart as a heel, you know, growing up on the Memphis product. And, man, you know, Jimmy Hart was out there just running his mouth in every angle. He had, you know, first family. He had this. He had that. He had his nose in everything. Of course, he had a musical background. I couldn't tell you all the things, I guess, songs for eventually WCW, WWE, and everything. Because he was with the Gentrys. They had a #1 hit.
Yep.
Him and Lawler for years had heat with each other. You know, when he started off wrestling or managing down in there. In a Memphis territory, so you can't even come from the Mid-South Coliseum without mentioning, you know, the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Jimmy is just one of those guys. When WCW was shutting down, I saw guys, 150 guys, go down to 75 guys, and we could see the writing on the wall. And we're not going to win that, but Jimmy Hart was one of the few that just kept telling the boys, "Keep your head up. I'm trying to keep you a job here, baby. Just do this TV for me." And he was producing some of the TV segments, you know, and just a sweetheart of a man. And like I said, when I saw him in October, he came up to a show, and he flew in, done a show in Cincinnati, drove about 3 hours, done a show, and, man, he was just, you know, fresh as a rose, come in, got up on stage, went downtown to this little town area. "Hey, we're going to have wrestling at 2 o'clock, everyone," you know, blah, blah, blah. And, man, he just got up there, and he is just a sweetheart of a man. I can't say enough good things about my love for Jimmy Hart. I may have hated him when I was young as a heel manager. You know, it goes back to one of those things. He's going to get the shit slapped out of him or whatever. Yeah. But one of those things where, as we'll get going on here, Jimmy Hart's just one of the top to me. He comes in at a real secure and safe number 4. Jimmy, the mouth of the South Hart.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you hated him just said how good he is at his job.
Right.
Also, you're right. He wrote a lot of songs for WCW. That's why knockoff songs are often called Jimmy Hart versions, because he did a lot of sound like, you know, DDP sounding like Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. Jimmy Hart is a fixture in wrestling, and he is a surprising 75 years old.
Well, I wasn't going to give his age because I thought he was about 72 or 73, so I didn't know. Because when I was talking about that show, he had flown in from Florida to Cincinnati, done a show. From Cincinnati is about a 3-hour drive to a show, and when he showed up, you'd have thought he had the energy of a 15-year-old. I'm serious. He came early. He came early and stayed late. Like I said, he went down into the town that was where the section where the wrestling wasn't at. It was about 3 blocks away, and he went up on stage in between a couple of bands and talked. He really promoted the wrestling. And he'd come back up there and was, of course, signing autographs and taking pictures. And then he was in the main event, of course, as a manager. And then afterwards, he stayed around and signed every autograph. Knowing he still had a 3-hour ride back to Cincinnati to stay all night to catch a fight the next day. So, man. Again, I knew it was at least 72, but man, I'm telling you what, that guy, he is full of energy, man. And again, nothing but love and respect for Jimmy Hart. So thanks for mentioning that because I wasn't going to bring up the age part because he was like a spring chicken out there, man.
Yeah.
Let me tell you,
well,
dude, he gave the people the money's worth, then some.
I don't know if he doesn't want that revealed or not. When I meet older people like that who are up and out and fucking grinding and just hustling. I met the lady who was the life model for Tinkerbell a couple of times. And she's like 86, 87 years old, and she drove herself to conventions by herself and got up and gave a better stage presentation than everybody else at these conventions that I used to MC at.
Yeah.
And you're just like, God damn, I need a nap at 2 o'clock.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, and I don't think he does mind his age being revealed because, I know every year on Twitter people wish him a happy birthday. So, it's, some things with social media, it's not a secret. Yeah. So, heck, that's just that. But we're putting it over anyway. So, I hope I'm still around at that age. You know what I'm saying? So, let alone being active and getting up and doing some kind of a, MCing or presentation or signing autographs. You know what I'm saying?
Thanks for listening to Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze. You can follow the show on Twitter at Bell to Bell Blaze. You can also follow Bobby on Twitter at BobbyBlaze744 and Jeremy on Twitter at The Geekish Cast. To purchase one of Bobby's books, you can visit tinyurl.com/blazebook1 to purchase Pin Me, Pay Me, Have Boots, Will Travel. And you can visit tinyurl.com/blazebook2 to get I Kicked Out on 2, The Education of a Wrestler. To donate to the show's podcast hosting fees, you can visit gofundme.com/Bell to Bell podcast hosting fees. Be sure to include a hyphen in every word in Bell to Bell podcast hosting fees. If you follow and listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. Be sure to share the show with any wrestling fan you may know.
Guess who has just signed a needed Masafuji up, fat boy? Jimmy Hart, and they're in Las Vegas, you old heart. On the road somewhere. Was it Texas or was it Canada?